We never wanted war. That's what people on Earth said, over and over. We never wanted war. Not with the Zurath, not with any species out there in the void of space. All we ever wanted was peace, trade, and understanding. But the galaxy laughed at that. Because Earth was new, weak, poor. Software humanity was the youngest species to join the intergalactic accord, and we were seen as nothing more than late-evolved primates with too many emotions and too much curiosity for our own good. We weren't feared, we weren't respected, we were tolerated. Barely. So when the Zurath came for the colony on Juno 9, no one cared. The Accord didn't respond to our distress calls. They claimed sovereign jurisdiction laws prevented intervention. But the truth? They didn't want to start a war with the Zurath over a bunch of humans trying to grow potatoes on a red rock in the Outer Rim. What they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that humanity keeps its pain close. We remember our dead. We carry grudges like heirlooms. We were told the Zurath would teach us a lesson. And they did. They made an example of Juno 9. 3,000 colonists lived there. Scientists, farmers, engineers, and families. They had no weapons, just shields, and a communication beacon that went dark within minutes. The Zurath landed, burned the crops, crushed the habitat domes, and broadcast the execution of every adult human live on their military channel. The children were left to suffocate slowly. When the footage reached Earth, the world stopped. Every screen went black. Every network, every satellite, every device. And then the video played. It wasn't edited. It wasn't censored. Humanity saw everything. There was a woman named Dr. Ilara Chen, a botanist from Hong Kong, who held her daughter in her arms as they were marched into an airlock. She tried to shield the girl's face with her coat, whispering lullabies as the oxygen was sucked out. Her voice was the last thing we heard before the screaming stopped. That was the moment Earth changed. We weren't the same species after Juno 9. The politicians held emergency meetings. The United Earth Council voted unanimously, something that hadn't happened in 200 years, to break from the intergalactic accord and initiate Project Retribution. We didn't have the technology to rival the Zurath, not yet, but we had rage, and rage makes you inventive. What most aliens didn't realize was how fast humans learn. We stole every bit of tech we could find. We hacked into alien systems, bribed fringe species, even reverse-engineered wreckage from the Juno 9 ruins. Within 2 years, Earth had ships that bent space, weapons that ripped open gravity wells, and AI that learned alien tactics in minutes. But it wasn't just weapons. We trained soldiers, but not like any before. They weren't bred for obedience. They were built for vengeance. Orphans of Juno 9 made up the 1st Battalion. They called themselves the Ashborn. And when the first Earth dreadnought launched, named Ilara's Wrath, we didn't ask for permission. We didn't negotiate. We hunted. The Zurath controlled 72 worlds. We marked them all, but we didn't go after their home planet first. No, we started with the outer colonies, the ones where they sent their young warriors for training, the ones where they celebrated their victories with fireworks and blood wine. We didn't fire a single shot at first. We hacked their systems, shut down oxygen scrubbers, disabled gravity, let the cold of space do the rest. And then, before leaving, we broadcast a message. You destroyed our friends. Earth made sure you'll never celebrate again. The galaxy started to whisper. Then they started to panic. Because humans weren't just fighting back, we were strategic, cold, merciless. Everything they said we weren't. And the Accord? They sent envoys, apologies, requests for dialogue. Earth didn't respond. We didn't want treaties. We wanted them to feel what we felt, to hear what we heard, to lose what we lost. And this was only the beginning. The Zurath didn't expect us to be patient. They expected revenge, sure, primitive and fast, like a cornered animal lashing out. But that wasn't what they got. What they got was something far worse. Humans didn't strike from anger. We struck from clarity. We planned every attack like a symphony, and every death we handed out was deliberate. By the time they realized what we were doing, 5 of their colonies had gone dark. Not destroyed. Emptied. No craters. No wreckage. Just silence. One by one, their training bases, fuel outposts, and listening satellites simply disappeared. Not a soul left alive. Our ships came and went like ghosts. No one saw them. No one heard them. Just a faint echo of a signal where a city used to be. The Accord started to panic. Species that once looked at us like zoo animals now saw something else in our eyes. Fear. That's when the stories began. A Zureth war captain named Gaeltor claimed his fleet was haunted by shadows. He said Earth had built weapons that didn't kill the body, but erased the soul. His last transmission was nothing but static and screams before his cruiser imploded from the inside, without a single missile fired. The Accord's council demanded an audience with Earth. Earth sent back a name. Talia Monroe. She had been a schoolteacher on Juno 9. Her whole class had suffocated during the attack, 12 children, ages 5 to 10. The Zureth left a message in the sand outside the shattered dome. Teach this ape. She survived. She was never the same. When the Accord delegation landed in Geneva, Talia met them on the front steps of the United Earth Council, dressed in black, her arms sleeved in tattoos, each line representing a child who died under her care. She didn't speak. She didn't bow. She just handed them a single data crystal and turned her back. Inside the crystal was the full archive of Earth's next phase, Operation Echo Silence. It wasn't just military. It was cultural, psychological, strategic. Every Zureth celebration, every holiday, every festival, every moment of unity or remembrance that meant something to them was listed, marked for destruction. They celebrated our suffering. Now they will mourn every joy they ever knew. We struck on the Zureth's sacred day of flame, a planetary-wide celebration of their first galactic conquest. It was their version of our Independence Day, except with fire rituals and blood oaths. The whole species shut down for the festivities. So did we. We hijacked their comms. As the fireworks lit up the skies of Zureth Prime, our signal replaced their anthem. It was a child's lullaby from Earth, the one Ilara Chen sang to her daughter in her final breath. We broadcast it across every city, every house, every ship, a soft, human voice humming against the glow of burning cities. Then our drones activated. No bombs, just nanites. Billions of them, small as dust, designed to melt through technology and erase digital archives. In 1 hour, we deleted every record of the sacred day of flame. Every song, every symbol, every image, their greatest day, vanished like it never existed. That was the new human weapon, memory theft. It wasn't about bodies anymore. It was about culture, identity, meaning. We weren't content to kill the Zureth. We were going to erase them from history, and the galaxy watched. Terrified. Because this wasn't a war, it was vengeance dressed in silence. The Accord pleaded again. They sent gifts, peace envoys. One desperate admiral offered Earth access to the Orion Arm Stargate in exchange for a ceasefire, but Monroe, now leader of Project Retribution, responded with a single word. No. Because the Zureth didn't just kill our people. They laughed doing it. They made art out of our pain, and now we were turning that same cruelty into a mirror, one they couldn't look away from, one that showed them who they really were, and what it cost to awaken the fury of a species that loved too hard and lost too much. Earth wasn't fighting to win anymore. We were fighting to remind them. You don't destroy our friends and think you'll ever celebrate again. The Zureth began to unravel. It wasn't immediate, not loud or explosive. It was subtle, like hairline fractures in the hull of a ship. They stopped smiling in public. Their once proud broadcasts, full of chest-thumping victories and imperial propaganda, became muted. Their leaders spoke in cautious tones. There were no more parades, because every time they tried to feel joy, Earth took something from them. One colony held a private naming ceremony for a newborn, hidden from galactic transmission. No one outside their moon was supposed to know. But we did. Within 24 hours, the moon's gravity collapsed, artificially. All atmosphere, all life, gone. We left a message at the event hall. You don't get to name what we buried. Across the galaxy, other species whispered about us. About the humans, about the Ashborn, about Monroe. They didn't say our names in public anymore. Just them. Those who came after Juno 9. The ones who do not forgive. We stopped wearing insignias. Our ships bore no flags, no codes, because Earth didn't need identity anymore. Vengeance was the identity. Talia Monroe walked among ruins and planned her next moves without emotion. She no longer operated from Earth. She led from orbit aboard Ilara's Wrath, which now had its own moon-sized AI brain. The children of Juno 9, grown, trained, and changed, ran the intelligence network that fed every mission. They didn't laugh anymore. They didn't even speak often. They whispered to each other in a language they made after the war. One built around pain, one that couldn't be translated. The Zureth, once so proud of their culture, found theirs disintegrating under the weight of silence. Their archives, songs, history, names, even DNA records had begun to vanish, erased in coordinated strikes. Some tried to save what they could by reverting to analog, hiding books, painting murals on cave walls. It didn't matter. We found those too, because Earth had learned how to hunt memories. We deployed units called the Echo Division, comprised of survivors from lost Earth cities, refugees from earlier alien skirmishes, linguists, and digital archaeologists. Their mission was to infiltrate, find cultural relics, and destroy them with surgical precision. No flame, no bombs, just the quiet death of identity. But there was one thing even Monroe hadn't expected. The Zureth started to fracture from within. Some began to resist their own government, claiming the war with Earth was cursed, that they'd awoken a vengeance older than time. Others formed death cults worshipping humanity as divine punishment. They called us the Forgotten Flame. Some begged for extinction, believing it would bring peace. Their leaders couldn't contain the spiral, and so, for the first time since Juno 9, they did the unthinkable. They surrendered. Not to the Accord, not in public, but directly to Earth. A Zureth general named Volkar, once commander of the Juno 9 assault fleet, sent a personal transmission to Monroe. His face was aged, haggard, his skin dull, his eyes hollow. He fell to his knees on screen. "I was wrong," he said. "You are not weak. You are not children. You are judgment itself." He offered his death, and the location of a secret archive vault containing the last unerased records of the Zureth's proudest history. He begged her to leave his people with something. Monroe didn't blink. She had the vault sterilized and sealed in neutron ice. Then she renamed the coordinates. Juno's silence. Even that last request, the mercy of memory, was denied. We didn't want reparations. We didn't want apologies. We wanted legacy. To make sure no one, ever again, would dare do to another what was done to us. To ensure that across every star, when species spoke of Earth, they didn't speak with pity. They spoke with fear. And maybe, just maybe, with understanding. Because Earth was never meant to conquer. We were meant to remember, and to make sure no one else ever forgot us again. The Accord couldn't stay silent anymore. They had watched Earth exact vengeance with terrifying precision, and for a while they hoped it would burn out, like a wildfire starved of fuel. But it didn't. Earth didn't rage blindly. We burned only what mattered, only what hurt. And that terrified them even more. Because you can't negotiate with clarity. So they called for a ceasefire summit. They invited all known species, every high-ranking diplomat, every peacekeeper, every empire in the quadrant. The meeting was to be held on Virella, a neutral moon orbiting a dead world. No weapons, no ships in orbit. Just talk. Earth didn't show. Instead, we sent a file, encrypted, ruthlessly simple. No virus, no threat, no AI trap. Just one image. It was a classroom. One from Juno 9, 12 desks, tiny chairs, bright drawings pinned to the walls, and in the center, scorched into the floor, was the outline of a child curled in fear. Beneath it, a single sentence. "This is why we don't forget." The image broke the summit. Half the species in attendance walked out. Some broke into arguments. One delegate from the Siren Coalition tore his own ceremonial robe in grief and announced his resignation. No treaties were signed. The galaxy was starting to realize that Earth hadn't just declared war. We had declared truth. And the truth was this: peace without accountability is just permission for another massacre. The Accord's hypocrisy had been exposed. They didn't intervene when Juno 9 burned. They didn't speak up when the Zureth celebrated genocide. And now that Earth made them uncomfortable, now they wanted diplomacy? Too late. Back aboard Ilara's Wrath, Monroe watched the summit crumble on her holofeed. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply opened a new file on the command table. The Celebration List, Phase 2. These weren't just Zureth targets anymore. They were galactic. Any civilization that had laughed, any diplomat who had cheered, any culture that had broadcast Juno 9 as a warning to others. They were on the list. Earth wasn't done. And then something happened that changed everything. A ship approached Earth's perimeter defenses. Not a warship, not a freighter, an escape pod. Alone, drifting slowly, barely holding pressure. It came from deep Zureth space, far past any known colony. It was intercepted by Ashbourne Echo 3, a reconnaissance unit running memory cleanup ops near Titan's Ring. Inside was a child. Not human. Zureth. She was small, sick, shaking, her scales dull, her breath shallow. But she carried something clutched in her claws. A hand-drawn picture. A human woman. Holding hands with a Zureth girl under a tree. Scrawled in poor Earth script were the words, "She was kind. Please don't kill me." The child was transferred to Monroe's ship. She stood silent before the child's stasis pod for hours, watching, breathing. Her officers waited for orders. Some wanted her to throw the pod into a sun. Others, still carrying the weight of Juno 9 in their eyes, said nothing at all. Finally, Monroe turned and said, "She didn't laugh." 3 words, that's all. But it meant everything. For the first time since Juno 9, Earth paused. Not out of mercy, not out of guilt, but because the war had always been about them, the ones who celebrated our pain. Not the innocent, not the ones who drew hope with crayons. So the child was given asylum. Federal. Treated. Protected. And her name was entered into Earth's archive of protected memory, Subject 001, Alari, Witness of Silence. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a line in the sand, a reminder. We are not monsters, but we will not forget who treated us like prey. The list still existed. The operations continued. But now, the galaxy had a chance. a chance to decide what side of history they wanted to stand on. Because Earth had become the memory of fire. And everyone had to choose, remember with us, or burn trying to forget. Alari changed things, not overnight, not loudly, but like a drop of ink in water, her presence spread through the ranks of Earth's military, through the Ashborn, even through Monroe herself. The child did not ask for pity. She did not beg. She simply existed. Quiet, observing, drawing, every wall in her quarters became covered with sketches, a field of stars, a human child holding hands with Azureth, a home with no flags. It wasn't the art that unsettled the crew of Ilara's wrath. It was the innocence in it, the belief that there could still be peace after everything, that even the daughter of murderers could choose a different path. Some hated her for it. Captain Drex, an Ashborn commander, had lost both parents in the fall of Juno 9. He refused to enter the same deck as Alari. "She wears their face," he told Monroe. "Their blood's in her teeth. I don't care if she cries flowers." Monroe didn't argue. She just nodded and marked him unfit for command. Because vengeance without control becomes its own disease, and Monroe had already watched one planet die from it. She wouldn't watch Earth become the second. But still, the war continued. The celebration list, Phase 2, targeted 9 systems, not for military value, but symbolic worth. These were the worlds that had aired Juno 9 footage as entertainment, the ones that ran betting pools on when Earth would surrender, the ones that toasted our extinction. Each one was different. On Taraxis Prime, we erased their central music vault. Centuries of symphonies, love songs, and cultural anthems deleted in seconds. The species tried to protest, claiming innocence, but leaked data files proved otherwise. They had composed a satirical opera about Juno 9. They called it The Dancing Apes of Dust. The lead composer was found dead the next morning. Not by our hand, by his own. Some scars don't need bullets. On Brellian 6, they held an annual Earthfall Festival. Costume contests, mock executions, children dressed as suffocating colonists. We sent one probe. It hovered silently over the city for 3 days. Didn't fire, didn't move. But during that time, every screen in the city glitched and played on loop the final 5 minutes of Ilara Chen's last transmission, the gasps, the child's cries, the silence. People begged for it to stop. We let it run. On the 4th day, the probe left. No bombs, no nanites, just memory, and that was enough. The galaxy began to shift. Not because they suddenly loved us, but because they finally believed us. They believed we would never stop. Not until every laugh, every cheer, every grin made at our expense was answered with a memory they couldn't erase. But with Alari came questions. Questions Monroe hadn't allowed herself to ask before. What comes after revenge? If the galaxy forgets to celebrate, if every flag is burned, every archive purged, what remains? What do we become? She visited Alari often, sometimes just to watch her draw, sometimes to answer strange questions. Why do humans have so many different skin colors? Why do some of you cry even when you're angry? Why do you still fight if you're so tired? One night, Alari asked, "Do you think if someone had hugged the one who ordered Juno 9, they would have changed?" Monroe froze. Something deep inside her cracked. Not broke. Just shifted. Because no one, not in all her years of commanding Ilara's wrath, not in all the blood and fire and silence, had asked that. She didn't answer. She just sat beside Alari. And for the first time in years, Monroe closed her eyes and wept. But it wasn't weakness. It was memory. And Earth's most powerful weapon had always been memory. We do not forget. Not pain, not love, not the ones who destroyed us. and not the ones brave enough to believe we could still be better. Even now. Even after everything. The Zureth weren't finished. Not the old regime. They were shattered. Their fleets broken, their culture in retreat, their empire nothing but ghost signals and burning stars. But from the rubble came a new voice. One no one expected. Young, sharp, furious. Commander Veilkar. He wasn't one of the Juno 9 butchers. He wasn't even born when it happened. But he grew up in the ashes, among the whispers, the hunger, the shame. He called himself the Child of Silence, and he swore that Earth would never erase his people without a cost. His first broadcast went viral across the Accord's encrypted channels. "My generation did not laugh at your pain," he said, standing in the ruins of a forgotten Zureth city. "But we will not kneel for your memory. You have become the thing you hated. And I will stop you, not to avenge my people, but to stop you from killing yourselves." Monroe watched the footage in the war room aboard Ilara's Wrath. Her face was still unreadable, but something flickered behind her eyes. Because Veilkar wasn't like the others. He spoke with conviction, and worse, he spoke with understanding. He didn't deny Juno 9. He didn't defend the laughter. He acknowledged it. And still, he stood against Earth, not to dishonor the dead, but to save the living. The Ashborn weren't impressed. "Another martyr," Drek scoffed. "Let him talk. His bones will be dust like the rest." But Monroe remained silent, because she saw what no one else did. Veilkar wasn't speaking to Earth. He was speaking to Ilari, and others like her, the children, the quiet ones, the next generation, the ones who hadn't picked a side yet. And for the first time, Earth's grip on fear began to slip. There were protests on Mars, small ones but loud. "Remember Juno," they chanted, "but don't become it." Ashborn loyalists crushed the protests, hard, but the message still leaked to the net. On Europa, a rogue AI refused orders to wipe another memory bank. It locked itself down and broadcast a looped message. "This is not defense. This is deletion." Monroe's command chain began to fray, and in the heart of it all was Alary. She had started writing. Not just drawing. Stories, simple ones, about a girl with scales and a woman with a haunted face who wandered the stars, planting trees where bombs had fallen. It wasn't subtle, but it was powerful. Monroe found one of the stories slipped under her door one night. No name, just the title, "The Ones Who Choose Something Else." She read it 3 times, and for the first time since Ilara Chen died, she considered ending the war. But then came the attack, not from Earth, from Veilkar. He struck one of Earth's forward memory ships, Echo Cinder 12. It was conducting cultural erasure ops on a fringe Zureth moon. Veil didn't use heavy weapons. He used hijack drones, Zureth tech fused with stolen human AI. He boarded the ship and transmitted one message to Earth. "You don't get to burn the library and call it justice." Then he vented the ship after evacuating the crew. No one died. But the message was clear. Someone was fighting back, with mercy, with strategy, with restraint. Everything Monroe had tried to kill in herself now stood against her. The Accord saw it. The galaxy saw it. Even her own officers started asking questions. Who were they really at war with now? The monsters who destroyed Juno 9? Or the reflection in the mirror? And Ilari? She said nothing. She just stood in the observation bay and stared out at the stars. Drawing again. This time she sketched Monroe. Not in black, but in gray. And behind her, a path of burned planets, with flowers trying to grow through the ash. The skies over Earth darkened, not with clouds, but with doubt. Monroe could feel it in the way her officers saluted her, hesitant, unsure. She saw it in the Ashborn, in their training routines, once sharp and methodical, now sloppy, distracted. Something inside the machine of vengeance was rusting, and the rust had a name. Vialkar. The child of silence had become more than a voice. He was a movement. Across former Zureth colonies, young survivors began carving his symbol. A broken circle with a line through it, onto walls, onto their own skin. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't justify the past. But they stood against obliteration. They believed Earth had a right to justice, but not to everything. And now, Vailkar had sent a request. A meeting, not with the Accord. With Monroe, no ships, no weapons, just the two of them, face to face, on the ruined moon where his parents once lived. Vornix Delta, reduced to a cratered graveyard in Earth's early strikes. The Ashborn were livid. "This is a trap," Drex hissed. "He wants to humanize himself. If we give him the stage, he'll win the galaxy." But Monroe didn't answer Drex. She was looking at Alari's latest drawing. It showed two shadows standing under a ruined sky. One was tall, cloaked in black. The other had horns and a scarred jaw. Between them was a single seed, buried in ash. The image haunted her. And so, she went. No escort, no transmission, no armor, just Talia Monroe, dressed in the same black coat she wore the day she showed the galaxy the truth of Juno 9. Vailkar was already waiting. He was younger than she expected, barely in his 20s, with a sharp jawline, silver-green scales, and tired, ancient eyes. They stood in silence. The wind howled. Then he spoke. "You were right to remember," he said, "but now you're making others forget." Monroe's voice was cold. "I don't want their forgiveness." "I'm not offering it," he replied. "I'm offering something else." She raised a brow. Vial pulled a metal cube from his satchel. He placed it between them. It hummed, then unfolded into a hologram. Records of Zureth war crimes. Names, command orders, the entire chain of command from Juno 9. Things even Earth hadn't found. "I want them punished," he said, "publicly, permanently." "And in return?" she asked. He looked her dead in the eyes. "You stop killing culture." She didn't speak. He stepped closer. "You've won, Talia. The Accord fears you. The galaxy will never mock Earth again. But what comes next? You kill every song? Every story? You make the universe forget why your vengeance mattered?" Her silence was heavy, because deep down, she knew. Juno 9 had become more than a wound. It had become a weapon. And weapons don't know when to stop unless someone tells them to. Vial knelt. Not as a plea, as a challenge. "Be the woman from the stories," he said, "not the monster they think you are. Show us what memory is really for." Monroe didn't respond, not with words. She took the cube, turned her back, and walked to her shuttle. When she returned to Ilara's wrath, she said nothing to her crew. She locked herself in the command chamber and uploaded the files. The AI flickered. "Confirmation," it said. "Proceed with tribunal data?" She paused. Then whispered, "Not yet." Instead, she summoned Alary. The girl arrived quietly, her hands stained with charcoal from drawing. Monroe handed her the cube. "You wanted to write endings," she said softly. "Maybe this one's yours." And for the first time, Alary smiled. Just a little. Alary sat alone in the memory chamber. The cube Vialkar had given Monroe pulsed softly in her hands, as if alive. Inside it were thousands of names, coordinates, logs, and orders, evidence so precise, so damning, it would tear apart the last of the Zureth command structure. The real architects of Juno 9. The ones who gave the orders, toasted the executions, and laughed as the children died. She knew what it meant. This cube was the final justice, or the beginning of something else. Monroe stood behind the glass, watching Ilari, her face unreadable. Around her, the command deck of Ilara's Wrath buzzed with quiet tension. The Ashborn waited for the next directive. Some still wanted blood. Some had started to question. And others, like Drex, looked at Ilari with barely concealed disgust. "She's soft," Drex had muttered earlier. "Letting her choose is a mistake." But Monroe wasn't listening to Drex anymore. She was listening to something else, something older than pain, older than vengeance. She was listening to the possibility of an after. Ilari stepped out of the chamber, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. She walked straight to Monroe, held the cube out, and whispered, "We do this, but we show it." Monroe frowned. "Explain." "We don't just prosecute them behind closed doors. We don't kill them in shadows like they did to us. We show the galaxy what justice looks like, what memory looks like." "And if the Accord tries to stop us?" Monroe asked. Alari's voice didn't shake. "Then we remind them who taught the stars to fear." The Ashborn Tribunal was held 2 weeks later, broadcast live to every known system. It was the first time Earth had ever revealed its courtroom to the galaxy, not in vengeance, but in reckoning. The accused were 11 Zureth officers, captured in the final sweep of Phase 2. Some had gone into hiding. Others had attempted to erase their own records. One tried to swallow a toxin capsule before the trial began. The Ashborn made sure he lived long enough to face the charges. The footage from Juno 9 was played again. Not the screams, not the death, the lives. A child's birthday party, a woman humming while planting a potato sprout, a teacher writing on a whiteboard with a crooked smile, Ilara Chen laughing as a toddler smeared paint on her lab coat. Then the transmission cut to silence, and the trial began. One by one, the Zureth commanders were questioned, shown the records, the signatures, the laughing toasts. Some denied, others wept. None were spared. But the verdict wasn't execution. It was remembrance. Each of them was sentenced to the Hall of Memory, a living prison orbiting Saturn where they would spend the rest of their lives maintaining the Juno 9 archives. Their job? To preserve every name, every voice, every drawing, every moment stolen by their orders. Their punishment was to become caretakers of the truth. The Accord was stunned. Galactic feeds were flooded with reactions. Some praised Earth's restraint. Others condemned it as psychological cruelty. But all agreed. This was no longer the Earth they thought they knew. This was something new. And when Ilari spoke at the closing of the tribunal, her voice echoed across every channel, every world. "I am not human, but I carry their stories now. The Zureth took lives and laughed. Earth remembered and burned. But I ask you this. Do we want to be known for what we destroy, or for what we refuse to forget?" Silence followed. Then applause, not from everyone, but from enough. Back aboard Ilara's Wrath, Monroe stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out in every direction, so wide, so cold, so full of ghosts. Ilari joined her, quiet as always. "Did we win?" she asked. Monroe didn't answer right away. She closed her eyes and pictured Juno 9. The heat of the sun over the red fields, the smell of soil, the sound of a child's laugh before the wind took it. "I don't think this is the kind of war you win," she said. Ilari nodded slowly. "But we didn't become them." "No," Monroe said. "We didn't." And in the silence that followed, Earth changed. Not into a conqueror, not into a victim, but into something far more dangerous and far more hopeful. A keeper of memory, a guardian of truth. The galaxy would never forget what we suffered. But now they would also remember what we chose. Not silence, not fire, but the kind of justice that stayed. The kind that planted seeds, even in ash.